It started with a receipt. Not in her purse. Not in a coat pocket. It was folded into the toe of her left boot, buried beneath the insole like a secret too fragile to throw away, but too damning to keep in plain sight. I wasn't snooping. I swear I wasn't. I was just trying to fix the weird squeaking sound her shoe had started making. She complained about it for days. She even asked if I could man up and do something useful for once. So I did. I pulled the sole out and found it. Dinner for two. 3 cocktails. 1 dessert. A note scribbled in pen beside the total. Let's do this again. You made me laugh. It wasn't my handwriting. I never make her laugh anymore. I think the last time she chuckled at anything I said, I was holding a broken spatula and a pot of burnt chili. I stared at that receipt for maybe 10 full minutes, my brain doing gymnastics just to convince me it didn't mean what it obviously meant. But it did. The date was 2 nights ago. The same night, she told me she was working late. She even brought home cold fries from a drive-thru to sell the lie. My chest didn't hurt. It buzzed, like a fluorescent light on the verge of burning out. I didn't confront her right away. That's not who I am. I'm the guy who overthinks everything. I put the receipt in my wallet under my expired driver's license and carried it around like it was radioactive. That was 4 days ago. Tonight, she came down the stairs wearing perfume I didn't recognize and a dress I hadn't seen since her sister's wedding. She twirled once, like she used to when we were happy. How do I look? She asked. I lied. Beautiful. She smiled, walked over, kissed my cheek. Then, with a grin so casual it nearly undid me, she said, I'm going on a date. Try not to get jealous. Just like that. No stammer. No shame. No hesitation. Like I was a roommate, not a husband. Like I was in the way of her evening. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I just nodded, and she left. And the moment the door closed behind her, I took out the receipt, looked at it one more time. Then I grabbed my keys, my coat, and the one thing she'd never expect me to bring. Tomorrow, she'll wish she never smiled when she said it. I didn't follow her car. That would have been too obvious. I waited exactly 7 minutes after she pulled out of the driveway, enough time for her to hit the main road. And then I left, on foot, walking into the dark with the receipt still folded in my pocket like a cursed object. I didn't even lock the door behind me. I wasn't following her to catch her in the act. I already knew she was cheating. I'd known since the silence between us stopped feeling temporary and started feeling rehearsed. You know what I mean? Like every conversation was a bad improv sketch where we both forgot our lines. So no, I didn't follow her to find out what she was doing. I followed her to find out who I was when I wasn't her husband anymore. I walked past the corner store where she used to wait for me in my old Ford before we moved. Past the Thai place she said gave her food poisoning once, though I always suspected she just hated my taste in restaurants. Past the old bus stop where I once stood in the rain for 40 minutes just so I could surprise her with coffee during her shift. All those little places still held pieces of our story, but none of them held her anymore. I ended up downtown without a plan, just aimless legs and too much adrenaline. I bought a black coffee from a gas station that smelled like wet rubber and microwave burritos, and I sat in the freezing wind on a bench outside the pharmacy. That's when I saw him. I didn't know his name yet, but I recognized his jacket, sleek, tan, expensive. I'd seen it once in our closet, hanging on my side. She told me it was a return from a client who didn't want it. Don't touch it, she said. It's going back tomorrow. It never went back. He got out of a car I didn't recognize and stood under a street lamp like he was posing for a magazine cover. Too clean. Too confident. He was holding something in his hand, a small white envelope. He wasn't nervous. Not even a little. He was texting. I sat there for 10 minutes while my coffee went cold and my stomach twisted. Then she appeared. High heels. That same dress. That perfume that made my throat feel like it was closing. She walked up to him like they'd done it 100 times. Hugged him. Not one of those quick, sideways hugs you give a coworker, but a full-bodied, 2 arms wrapped, cheek against chest kind of embrace. The kind I hadn't felt in months. And then, in the middle of the sidewalk, in public, she kissed him. Long, slow, like she wanted the world to see. I didn't move. Didn't blink. I just sat there with the coffee shaking in my hand, realizing something terrifying. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was curious. Because the envelope he gave her? She didn't open it. She just slipped it into her purse like it was something sacred. And I needed to know what the hell was inside. I didn't go home that night. Couldn't. The image of her kissing him under the street lamp felt burned into the backs of my eyelids. Every time I blinked, there it was, her hands on his chest, her smile pressed against someone else's lips. But that wasn't what haunted me most. It was the envelope. She hadn't even glanced inside. That meant she already knew what was in it. That meant it wasn't a surprise, it was routine. So I waited. I didn't even know why. I just stood in the shadows like some pathetic ghost while they walked 2 blocks together, hand in hand, like teenagers skipping curfew. They disappeared into a boutique hotel that looked way too clean for what I was feeling. I could have followed. I didn't. Instead, I went home. She came back around midnight. I heard the garage door creak open, followed by her heels on the tile, deliberate, unhurried. She didn't tiptoe like someone with a secret. She walked like someone who owned the silence in that house. I lay awake and kept my eyes closed while she undressed, slipped into bed, and texted someone before turning off the lamp. I waited until her breath slowed and her back rose and fell in that rhythmic way that only sleep produces. Then I moved. I didn't go for her phone. I went for her purse. It was in the kitchen, lazily tossed onto a chair like always. I moved slowly, not out of fear, just shame. Like I was the criminal here. Like I was betraying her by confirming her betrayal. The envelope was still there. Still unopened. No seal. Just folded shut. I opened it. Inside was a glossy photo. Just one. Thick paper. Matte finish. It showed her, in the passenger seat of a car I didn't recognize, laughing at something out of frame. Her eyes were crinkled. Her lips parted mid-laugh. She looked more alive in that frozen moment than she had in the past 6 months with me. On the back, in handwriting that wasn't mine, were 3 words. Keep this memory. I felt like I was staring at something I was never meant to see, something holy, in a sick, twisted way. This wasn't about sex. This wasn't some dumb affair for attention. She was in love. I put the photo back, exactly the way I found it. Sealed the envelope with a little moisture on my thumb. Quiet. Careful. Gentle. But I wasn't done. I took it to the copier in my office and made a scan. High-res. Full color. I emailed it to myself, then printed 2 copies. One I hid in the attic under a box of old Halloween decorations. The other I slid into a book I knew she'd never touch, my dad's old tax manual. I didn't know what I was planning yet. Revenge? Exposure? A confrontation? No. I wanted to understand first. Because if she had this secret world, I wanted to see how deep the rabbit hole went before I burned the whole thing down. The next morning, she acted like nothing had happened. She stood barefoot in the kitchen, wearing my old college hoodie like it still meant something. She made her usual green smoothie, humming some pop songs she used to hate. She even kissed my cheek on her way out the door. It was robotic, like she had rehearsed it. Like this version of herself was a costume she wore during business hours, and I was the stagehand making sure the lights stayed on. But I couldn't unsee the photo. Her laughing in that car. The handwriting on the back. Keep this memory. That line looped in my brain until it started sounding like a dare. So I decided to look for more. Not because I wanted to ruin her life, but because she had already shattered mine. I just wanted to see what the wreckage looked like from her side. That night, while she showered, I went back to the purse. The envelope was gone. I didn't panic. Not yet. I figured she moved it. Maybe into the bedroom. Maybe burned it. Maybe she knew I'd seen it and wanted to test me. But then I noticed something odd. Her laptop was open on the kitchen table. She never left it open. Never. I stared at it. The screen was still glowing. A spreadsheet of all things. But not work stuff. Not inventory or invoices or budgets. It was a list of dates. Each one labeled with a time, a location, and a 3-letter code. FRDRST, kill MNV. Some were color-coded. Red, blue, yellow. I scrolled down. It went back 7 months. One entry stood out. The date matched the night she said she was visiting her mom after a fight we had about credit cards. The code next to it read, MNV, emergency. Emergency? I clicked on another tab. Password protected. I froze. I was about to close everything, pretend I hadn't seen it, but something told me not to. I tried the first password that came to mind. Our dog's name. Nothing. Her birthday? Nope. Her mom's middle name? Still locked. Then I tried something stupid. Something she once told me she'd never forget. The name of the restaurant we ate at the night I proposed. It worked. The folder opened into what looked like a travel itinerary, but not for us. It had maps, parking instructions, coded addresses with hotel confirmation numbers, and scanned IDs. None of them were mine. 2 were fake. 1 was real. A name I didn't recognize, Elias Rohn. That's when I heard it. Her footsteps in the hallway. I panicked. Closed everything in a frenzy. Slammed the lid of the laptop just as she stepped into the room, hair wrapped in a towel, wearing a robe like she wasn't carrying weapons in her smile. "You okay?" she asked, eyeing me. I nodded too fast. Just, checking an email. She didn't believe me. I saw it in her eyes. But she didn't press. She just walked past me, poured herself a glass of wine, and said, "I might be out late tomorrow. Don't wait up." I smiled. "Sure. Enjoy." But inside, my mind was burning. Who the hell was Elias Rohn? And why did my wife have his ID? I waited until she left the next morning. She said she had a work retreat, the kind with no cell service, no end time, no address I was allowed to know. She kissed my forehead like I was furniture, said, "Don't miss me too much," then shut the door like I was never going to be part of her day again. The second her car disappeared down the street, I unlocked her laptop. The password still worked. I went straight to the folder marked Rohn, and this time, I opened every single file. Most of it was code names, receipts, reservation records, and burner phone logs, like some spy movie without the soundtrack. But one file stopped me cold. It was a scanned document, not a fake ID, a birth certificate, not hers, not mine, his. Elias Rohn, born 1991, Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Mother, unknown. Father, declined. That name had shown up in 2 calendar entries labeled DR meeting, 4 p.m., no notes allowed. I stared at the document like it had fangs. None of this made sense. My wife was a florist, a woman who cried during soap commercials and collected old postcards. She once spent 4 hours picking the perfect throw pillows for our couch. And now I was looking at a government-issued document for a man I'd never met, whose name she clearly used as a code. I checked her downloads folder. Nothing. But her cloud drive? That was the jackpot. One folder titled Backups had subfolders named by year. I opened 2023, and there it was, hundreds of voice memos. Not hers, his. And his voice chilled me to the bone. Calm, quiet, calculated. The first message, just confirmed Friday. Same room, same plan. Do not deviate. Remember what we discussed. Keep the subject unstable but contained. The second, if anyone gets curious, use misdirection. Let them feel smart. That's how you keep them slow. I sat there, my fingers numb on the trackpad, listening to a man I didn't know talk like he was directing some kind of experiment, like people's lives were just a board game to him. And worst of all, my wife? She was replying. Her voice, softer than I remembered, said things like, "Understood," and "He suspects nothing," and "Phase 2 begins after the scan." Scan. I found the image file. At first, I didn't recognize what I was looking at. Black and white, blurry at the edges. Then I realized it was me, sitting at the kitchen table. From above, she had recorded me. Not just audio. Surveillance. I stood up so fast the chair toppled behind me. My heart was hammering so loud I thought the walls would echo with it. I searched every corner of that room, every vent, every ceiling corner, and there it was. A tiny black pinhole, tucked into the light fixture above the table. She'd been watching me, not metaphorically, literally. And in that moment, I stopped being heartbroken. I stopped being the pathetic, sad, hollow version of myself that I had become. Something shifted. I wasn't just a betrayed husband anymore. I was a target, and I wanted to know why. I didn't leave the house that day. I didn't eat. I didn't speak to anyone. I just sat there on the couch, laptop open on my knees, the surveillance photo of me still glowing on the screen. I stared at myself, caught mid-bite, a spoonful of cereal frozen in the air. It was grainy, slightly tilted, time-stamped. It looked like something out of a courtroom exhibit. I looked like a stranger. That night, I pretended to be asleep when she came home. She didn't say a word. No hug. No kiss. No lie to cushion whatever hell she was dragging behind her. I felt the bed shift as she lay down, scrolling on her phone for almost half an hour before finally settling in. Her breathing was even. Normal. Like nothing had changed. But everything had. The next morning, I waited until she left again. She was running errands, this time. Left in a hurry, barely touching her coffee. I watched her drive off, then immediately went upstairs. Her office was on the second floor, across from the guest bathroom. We always joked it looked too clean to belong to either of us. Now it felt like enemy territory. I had been in that room 1,000 times. Helped her rearrange bookshelves, fix the blinds, mount that tacky abstract painting she insisted made the space less sterile. But there was one thing I'd never touched, her antique file cabinet. Bottom drawer. Always locked. I had asked about it once. She laughed and said, "That's where I keep the bodies." Back then, I laughed too. Now, I found the key inside the lining of her old jewelry box, tucked under a fake bottom I didn't even know existed. She probably thought I'd never think to check. She was wrong. The drawer creaked open like it hadn't been touched in years. But what I found inside, it wasn't dusty. It wasn't forgotten. It was organized. 3 separate folders, each one labeled in her handwriting, but not with words, with initials. L, R, M, A, T, J. Inside the first folder were printed screenshots, emails, message threads, social media DMs, even blurred-out dating app chats. All between her and a man named Logan R. I recognized the name. She once said he was an old classmate who reached out about flowers for his wedding. What I saw was not wedding planning. It was digital intimacy, curated like a case file. The second folder? Hotel receipts, all billed to corporate aliases, matching the same dates and cities I had seen in that spreadsheet on her laptop. The third folder was empty, except for a single note paperclipped to the inside. "If he finds this, trigger exit plan. Do not engage." Written in her handwriting. I sat there holding the paper like it was bleeding. My fingers started to shake. I looked behind me instinctively, half expecting her to be standing in the doorway with a knife or a gun or just that same cold, smug smirk. But the room was empty. The silence in that house was unbearable now, not because it was quiet, but because I no longer believed I was ever alone. I put everything back exactly as I found it. Locked the drawer, returned the key, closed the jewelry box, stepped out of that room like I was walking away from a crime scene. Except I wasn't the criminal. Not yet. Because something had snapped inside me. Not out of rage, but out of survival. She had an exit plan. But now, so did I. I used to believe that trust died slowly, like a leak you don't notice until the whole floor warps beneath you. But now I know it can vanish in 1 second, the exact second you pull open a drawer you were never supposed to touch. She left that morning in a rush, said something about meeting a vendor across town. Her tone was distracted, her bag half zipped, car keys already dangling from one hand. She didn't even look at me when she said goodbye. Just a lazy wave and a mumbled, "Don't forget to water the plants." Like I was a roommate. Or a pet. The moment her car turned the corner, I went straight upstairs to her office. I'd walked past that room for years, always thinking it was just her work sanctuary. Candles, books, plants, and a locked file cabinet she insisted was filled with boring invoices. But after everything I'd uncovered, the surveillance, the fake names, the voice memos, I wasn't buying the invoice story anymore. The bottom drawer had always been locked, and not with a cheap key, with one of those heavy brass locks that rattles when you tug it. That morning, I brought tools. A flathead screwdriver, a tension wrench. YouTube had taught me enough to be dangerous. It took 13 minutes. 13 shaky, nervous minutes filled with snapping pins and whispered cursing. But then, click, the lock gave way. I pulled the drawer open. There were no invoices. There were photos, dozens of them, neatly stacked, rubber banded, each one labeled in tiny, perfect handwriting. But they weren't of her. They were of me, sleeping, reading, cooking, standing on the porch, walking down the driveway, sitting in my car. Some were black and white. Some looked like stills from a security camera. One, God help me, was taken from inside the shower. I could see my own back, blurred by the steam. I felt physically sick. Under the stack of photos was a notebook, leather-bound, pages filled edge to edge in her handwriting. Not journal entries. Observations. 9:42 a.m. He didn't notice the tag was moved on his coat. Level of awareness still low. Tuesday. When told a fabricated story about delivery delay, he accepted it with no resistance. Sleeping patterns show irregularity when exposed to environmental stressors. Hypothesis confirmed. I kept flipping. Every page made my throat tighten. I wasn't her husband. I was a subject. A variable. A long-term test. The last page was a single line, written in red ink, circled twice. Approaching final stage. Roan will initiate contact when readiness is confirmed. Readiness? What the hell did that mean? I suddenly felt exposed. Like maybe she was watching me right now. Like maybe the moment I opened that drawer, something invisible began to move. Something I wouldn't be able to stop. I put the notebook back, locked the drawer again, wiped everything down with the edge of my sleeve. Then I just stood there, in the middle of the room, staring at the walls, wondering how many of them had ears. Because it was no longer just about betrayal. It was about control. And whatever this final stage was, I was already part of it. She must have known I'd opened the drawer. I don't know how. Maybe she saw the shift in my eyes when we spoke. Maybe she noticed the faint mark where the lock had been picked. Or maybe she didn't need evidence. Maybe she just knew me well enough to feel the cracks forming. Because 2 nights later, she came home early. Earlier than usual. Earlier than expected. I was in the kitchen, pretending to scroll through my phone. She walked in wearing that same tan coat, the one I now realized wasn't hers to begin with. Her hair was pulled back tightly, not a strand out of place. Her eyes scanned the room too quickly, like a predator walking into a trap. "You've been going through my things," she said. No preamble, no mask. The words were cold, flat, mechanical. I met her gaze. For the first time in weeks, I didn't look away. "You've been documenting me," I replied. "So I guess we're even." She laughed. Actually laughed. But it wasn't joy, it was relief. As if she had been waiting for this confrontation, and now that it was here, she was finally in control again. "You weren't supposed to find it this soon," she said, taking off her coat slowly. "But maybe it's better this way." I stood, calm, controlled. But inside, adrenaline was boiling in my veins. Not panic, readiness. Because I hadn't just opened drawers. I'd made copies of the files. Every notebook scan, every folder, every photo. I had a flash drive hidden in my sock, and a second one taped behind the radiator at work. I'd even emailed one to a lawyer who owed my father a favor. And more importantly, I'd been talking to people. Real people. A tech guy who used to work in surveillance. A woman who did contract compliance for security firms. A whistleblower who had once called her brilliant, terrifying, and expendable. And all of them confirmed the same thing. I wasn't the first. But I was damn sure going to be the last. So when she stepped closer and said, "There's still a way we can fix this," I didn't flinch. I didn't beg. I didn't whimper. I smiled. "You're right," I said softly. "But it's already fixed." She froze. "You were so busy tracking my movements, you forgot to monitor my backups. You forgot I had friends. That I could still learn. That maybe, just maybe, I'm not as weak as you thought." She stepped back. For the first time, her expression cracked. She wasn't in control anymore, and she knew it. I handed her an envelope. Inside, a copy of the surveillance photos, her coded messages, a list of names, and one simple note. "If anything happens to me, this goes everywhere." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to destroy her. I just needed freedom. And for the first time in years, I felt it. I moved out the next morning. Quietly. Cleanly. I left behind the keys, the framed photos, the anniversary gifts she never really liked. I didn't take anything that belonged to us, because there was never really an us. There was just a test subject. And now, I'm done being someone's experiment. I moved into a small apartment 2 towns over. Got a dog. Started writing again, something I hadn't done in a decade. I cook what I like. I sleep when I want. I don't stare at the ceiling wondering who's watching. And best of all, I'm finally living a life that doesn't need to be recorded to feel real.